Hello, I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual Scholastic Study. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. The Union is free and happy like a small nation, glorious and strong like a great one. Alexis De Tocqueville. This essay is Federalism and Democracy, Volume 1, Part 1, Chapter 8, Subchapters 22 of Democracy in America by Alexis De Tocqueville. Guest essayist, Will Morrisey. Pages, if you're reading with us, 149 through 154. In order to construct modern centralized states on the model advocated by Machiavelli, European monarchs weakened the aristocratic class, which had ruled the feudal states, characterized by weak monarchs and powerful landlords. Weak aristocracies meant increasingly egalitarian civil societies beneath the modern states, whether their regimes were monarchic or republican. For de Tocqueville, democracy is not itself a regime, and equality is neither a natural or legit right. Democracy is a social condition, one that must be understood clearly if it does not descend into despotism. As the most thoroughly democratized society in the world in the 1830s, this despite slavery, America fascinated the young French aristocrat, living in the aftermath of the debacle of the French republicanism in the 1790s and of French monarchy in the 1780s, and again in the Napoleonic Wars. Differing from feudal states in their degree of centralization, modern states also differed from ancient city-states in size, being far larger in both territory and population. In small states, de Tocqueville remarks, quote, "The eye of society penetrates everywhere," end quote. As the song advises, don't try that in a small town. Ambitions modest, no Napoleon has arisen from Slovenia. In small states, internal well-being is prized more than the vain smoke of glory. Manners and morals are simple and peaceful, inequality of wealth less pronounced. Political freedom is the natural condition of small states. In all times, antiquity, Athens, and modernity, Switzerland, quote, "small towns have been cradles of political freedom," end quote. They lose that freedom on those rare occasions when they do muster the power to expand. Quote, "The history of the world does not furnish an example of a great nation that has long remained a republic," end quote. Whether the nation is ancient Rome or modern France. That is because, quote, "all the passions fatal to republics grow with the extent of territory, whereas the virtues that serve as their support do not increase in the same measure," end quote. The gulf between rich and poor widens, great cities arise with their, quote, "depravity of morals," end quote. Individuals become less patriotic, more selfish. This is worse for republican regimes than for monarchies, as republics depend upon popular virtue, while monarchy, quote, "makes use of the people and does not depend on them," end quote. In sum, quote, "nothing is so contrary to the well-being and freedom of men as great empires," end quote. This notwithstanding, quote, "great states," end quote, enjoy some substantial advantages. Their cities are, quote, "like vast intellectual centers where ideas circulate more freely," end quote, than in the more censorious atmosphere of small communities. The people are safer from invasion since the borders are remote from much of the population. Above all, Great states wield greater force than small states, which is, quote, one of the first conditions of happiness and even existence for nations, end quote. De Tocqueville, quote, does not know of a condition more deplorable than that of a people that cannot defend itself or be self-efficient, end quote. What then shall Republican legislatures do? The American founders took the recommendations of Montesquieu, federalism, which, as Publius argues in the 10th Federalist, permits Americans to live in an, quote, extended, end quote, republic, one that can preserve the virtues needed for republicanism while enjoying the advantages of a large modern state. While the Congress, quote, regulates the principal actions of social existence, end quote, it leaves administrative details to the, quote, provincial legislatures, end quote. In a democratic republic, the people are sovereign. In the United States, the people have divided their sovereignty between the federal government and the provinces or states. The federal government attends to the general welfare of the nation, but can only act through specific, enumerated powers set down in the Constitution. It can reach into the states and rule their citizens directly, but not in all, and indeed not in most things. This is what allows democracy or civil social equality to, quote unquote, work in the United States. Because the federal government organizes American foreign policy, the states need not take on the expense or the effort to defend themselves, and so can concentrate their energies on internal improvements, such as small political communities are inclined to do. This spirit of economic enterprise is enhanced by the constitutional prohibition of tariffs among the states, which makes America into a vast free trade zone. The spirit of economic enterprise itself redirects ambitions toward peaceful commerce and away from military glory, the passion of aristocrats. Americans thereby unite, quote, the zeal of citizens, end quote, with their self-interest. With no arms to purchase and no wars to sustain, among state politicians, quote, ambition for power makes way for love of well-being, a more vulgar but less dangerous passion, end quote, than the love of glory, the passion of aristocrats. Vulgar means not noble, not aristocratic, but democratic. Federalism thus reinforces the democratic republican regime, unlike in the South American republics of the time, where republicanism extended over large territories but under centralized governments. In the Federal Republic of the United States, quote, the public spirit of the Union itself is in a way only a summation of provincial patriotism, end quote. Combining civic participation with the spirit of commercial enterprise, Americans unite, quote, the zeal of citizens, end quote, with economic self-interest, each passion moderating the other. Thanks to the wisdom of the framers of the United States Constitution, quote, the Union is a great republic in extent, but one could, in a way, liken it to a small republic because the objects with which its government is occupied are few, end quote. The federal government exercises substantial power, but in a manner, quote, not dangerous to freedom, end quote, because unlike a fully centralized government, it does not, quote, excite those immoderate desires for power and attention that are so fatal to great republics, end quote. Whether in ancient Rome, modern France, or modern Brazil. Such desires that do arise, quote, break against the individual interest and passion of the states, end quote, jealous defenders of their own share of the popular sovereignty. In the civil society of American democracy within a federal system, quote, the Union is free and happy like a small nation, glorious and strong like a great one, end quote. This essay was written by Will Morrisey. Will Morrisey holds the William and Patricia Lamothe Chair in the United States Constitution at Hillsdale College, Hillsdale, Michigan, where he has taught since 2000.